See what the attendees- No attendees yet, so I'll wait. All right, we'll wait.
We
got nothing but
Will
time.
probably just for you. We've got Coral was out.
So that's
Ed
just.
had to work. There's Will. Can we promote them all?
Yeah, sure. Oh, it's moving around.
Perez. Yeah, see Perez?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Promote her.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a lot of guests.
We have
Just a
Pete
few.
and I think Darlene, and I don't think Therese has been promoted.
So maybe she'll be
There she is.
presenting.
Yeah.
something?
Okay, good.
Will, you there?
Indeed, I am.
Thank you.
I will.
Just-
Hi.
Let's give let's just give 1 or 2 more minutes. How are you doing, Will?
Doing okay.
How's your arm? I haven't talked to you in a long time.
That's the first thing I thought of this morning.
Oh, that's very nice of you. My arm is healed. That's kind of you. I keep up with PT and things are good.
That's good. Glad to hear.
And you're okay. You're malleable now, right?
Absolutely. Full range of
good.
motion.
Well, that was
Full
quite a
range of
while ago.
motion is
actually.
great.
I know, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How are all of you?
I think everybody's
All things considered,
Warm, oh yeah.
everyone's tired, I think.
Not emotionally happy, but otherwise okay.
Understood there.
So, I mean, a lot of people had conflicts or were too sad to leave their house or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of people like that. You know, the team taught the class today, NYU, and a lot of his students wrote in and said, oh, they couldn't come. They were so depressed they couldn't.
Fieldston
Yeah.
made school options.
Yeah, that was somebody, was that the only school? There were a couple
I don't know,
schools
I
that did
heard
that.
that Fieldston, the Times wrote about Fieldston.
Yeah.
It's like, you have kids that you're teaching, why don't you bring them in and teach?
Yeah.
Like, use this to teach. But whatever.
Anyway, let's, maybe we should get started. I don't know if other people will come. Let me just kick it off and I'll introduce you. Well, my name is Rich Cacapola. I'm the chair of the Parks and Waterfront Committee. Let me just introduce my fellow members.
I'm Susanna Aaron, I'm vice chair of the committee.
And I'm Shirley Secunda, a full board member of the committee.
Right. Can you see who's in the attendance?
Yeah, sure. The attendees, we have Darlene and
Yes.
Stephen Brandy, Therese. Therese,
Okay.
I need to
I don't know why.
promote you. And
No.
Pete Davies and Darlene Lutz and see.
Frederica is unable to make it. I think Coral is unable to make it.
Oh, no.
Elizabeth, it was out in Pennsylvania. She
Oh.
won't get home until today.
Oh,
So I don't know where Matt is. I'll check my messages, but
All right, well,
we've got. Want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Cook.
nice to meet
Nice to
you.
meet you. Are you here for this topic of today?
I am. I'm an artist in Washington Square Park.
Great.
And I'm upset about the change in enforcement that's been called not a change in enforcement. I'll let you.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
let's do this. The topic for today, we're doing a presentation. It's one topic, and we're fortunate to have Will Morrison, the Washington Square Park Administrator, and he wears 2 hats, the Executive Director of the Washington Square Park Conservancy. He's talking about a new program that is Department of Parks and Recreation program, a new initiative called Vital Parks for All. And we were hoping to do a demonstration, but you can talk about it, Will. I have to inform you, Will, that there was our very own Shirley Secunda here had attended a meeting back in June when this was first announced, and had talked to us about it gave us a 15-point overview of it. So I didn't share it around. I didn't want to present it to anybody,
So
but
you wrote
yeah, that
Shirley?
was Shirley's. Yeah.
Sure.
yeah.
Go ahead, Will. Thanks for attending.
Yeah, thank you. I have a little bit of a background here on it, and then I'll attempt to share my screen and go through a demo of the digital platform. Just to jump right in, I'm here to introduce you all to Vital Parks for All, investing in NYC's living infrastructure. It's NYC Parks' vision to strengthen our city's health, environment, and communities through our park system. As you know, our parks are essential for the well-being of our city and our lives. And NYC Parks believes that every New Yorker needs access within their own community to parks that are clean and safe, green and resilient, and supported by engaged and empowered New Yorkers like you. So those are sort of the three buckets: clean and safe, green and resilient, engaged and empowered. And it'll make more sense when I'm in the live dashboard. New York City faces urgent challenges such as the epidemic of loneliness, climate change, declining life expectancy, aging infrastructure, and increased park usage since COVID-19. To address these crises, we're making an initial investment of $3.2 billion to deliver more Vital Parks benefits to the communities that need them the most. Through Vital Parks for All, we're connecting New Yorkers with the extensive mental and physical health benefits of parks, social connection, and community unity through shared facilities and events, environmental benefits like heat reduction and improved air quality. We are also empowering New Yorkers with the data they need to celebrate and advocate for their own parks. And that's really the core of the digital dashboard that I'm going to go through in a minute. We've launched the Vital Parks Explorer, a tool that provides New Yorkers with information about their community's access to more than 20 key elements that make up a vital park system and how it compares to communities across the city. You can use the Explorer to see how well served your community is by these components of a flourishing park system, and if gaps exist, advocate for more resources to fill them. You can also focus on your individual park and how well it is doing through the My Parks Vitals Signs tool, a profile of every park in the city. My Vital Park signs include recent capital investments, mapped trees, events, volunteer engagement opportunities, and a park condition score that shows its level of cleanliness and maintenance. You can visit the Vital Parks Explorer and My Park Vital Signs on our website, and I'm about to pull it up right now. So let me try to share my screen here and let me know if this works. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah. Yes.
Excellent. So I always think it's good to start with the actual homepage of the Parks Department website. Vital Parks for All is right here on the homepage. So if you click that, you will go into essentially the Vital Parks homepage for the initiative. So right here, I'm not going to open up this plan, but it is very interesting. It's a very interesting read. It's a downloadable PDF. I recommend everybody takes a look if you have the time. And there was a great forum that our amazing commissioner, Sue Donahue, hosted back in June. Shirley, that may have been the one you attended, perhaps. But there's a full recording of it on this webpage as well. But I'm going to focus for the most part on the actual Vital Park System Explorer, the main tool here. So if you navigate to this website from our homepage and you hit Explore the System, it will bring you to the actual Vital Parks system. And so I'm going to zoom out here for the benefit of and so this is it. This is the entire dashboard. And as you can see here, I mentioned about 20 different metrics or ways to look at your community and the parks in your community. These are those metrics. But I would actually like to start just with this map. So this is very much like any map you've ever seen on an app or a web page. You click and drag, and it shows every park in the city overlaid 3 different ways. We're obviously going to spend the most amount of time at the community district level because this is a community board meeting after all, but you can also toggle it to see New York State classified disadvantaged communities throughout the city. And you can also swap it out to show gun violence prevention precincts, of which we have none in the borough of Manhattan. But I'm going to put it back on the community boards here. And so, zooming into all our lovely home, Manhattan District 2 a bit. So at this level, you can see there's percentages next to each, below each community board. And that corresponds to whatever metric is highlighted here. So you can see this one is active recreation area. And every single one of these has a description right here. So this means that essentially the percentage of people in this district that live within a 10-minute walk to an athletic field, sport court, or skate park maintained by NYC Parks. So I'm going to go through more of these in a minute and go into a little bit more detail, but I think something that's great for every community board is that if you click just the community board, it's going to bring up what looks like a lot of data. And because it is a lot of data. But what this shows is it actually goes through every metric that we can click through as a map, and it compares community board 2 to the citywide average in each category. So in terms of active recreation area, the citywide average is 79%. This community board has 93% of the people living in it within a 10-minute walk to an athletic field. To show one that's, a much different contrast, we're in Lower Manhattan, so we don't have many forever wild natural areas in the southern part of the city. So this community district has 0, where the citywide average is 31. So this is a quick snapshot of the whole community board across all of the metrics, but it is not as visually appealing as doing it through the map, but I did want to show that. So the map is really fun to play around with. So if we dial in a little bit more, and once you dial in enough, you get rid of the blocks that connote the various community board boundaries, see all of the blocks and various properties. So to highlight a difference, all of these white dots right here are considered active recreation areas. And I will give a pop quiz. What do you think is the only active recreation area in Washington Square Park?
I don't know.
It's the, that looks like the area near, is that the dog run?
That it's the pétanque court, the French version of bocce. That's right across from
I should have guessed
the
that.
small dog run.
Right.
Bit of trivia. But more indicative is just to the west is obviously the West 4th Street basketball courts. We've got Tony D'Appolito down here, Passanante down on Houston Street. And so just to highlight what each one does. So if I go to dog runs, the white dots change. And so when you look at that, there's only the 2 in Washington Square Park. Or if you zoom out, you'll still see the dots if you zoom out to the boundaries, but they're kind of hidden behind that shade of green. And so you can do that really for all of these. And what I think is kind of a cool feature that requires a little bit of an explanation is that if you can see here that anywhere that's actually within a 10-minute walk, the streets are highlighted in green, and it sort of fades if you're outside of that 10-minute zone, right? So like if we go to hiking trails, everything's blank, right? If we go to nature centers, similarly. But if we go to cooling features, which are essentially like water fountain spray showers, a lot of the map is lit up. Or if you do let's do recreation centers, you can see how there's a dearth here kind of in the middle there. And you can do this not, for those curious, not just for community board 2, obviously you can drag and drop this all over the place. So you can kind of see through where it gets lighter, where there's a dearth of for example, a recreation center. So that is the gist of the tools. As you can see here, the value pillars I mentioned earlier: clean and safe, green and resilient, engaged and empowered. These icons just match which of these metrics correspond to these various value pillars. If we go to for example, community gardens is a fun one. So now I want to do another exercise. Let's pick a block, maybe a block somebody lives on, that's in the room, that's in the neighborhood. Any takers for something on the board here?
Do community board 3, do our location.
Okay, your location, which I believe is just south, is right here, right?
That's
So
right.
every block in the city that is part of this, as you can see, when you hover over it, it highlights it in red, right? So if you do this block, it shows you, it gives you the same view that I showed you earlier, but now every metric where you meet that 10-minute threshold is highlighted in green.
Wow.
So you actually get a much more visually engaging picture of, within 10 minutes of the room you all are in right now, you are in proximity to everything highlighted in green, but you are not within a 10-minute walk of the waterfront, a significant amount of tree canopy, greenways, forever wild, so on and so forth. I will call out a fun one, which is a unique layer that we're able to do because of our tree map, that if you do use the tree canopy cover, you can obviously see the actual canopy coverage, which I just think is cool. And I work for the Parks Department. Of course, I think trees are cool. So, that is the gist of this map. And again, it all goes back to providing members of the New York City community with visualized and accurate and deep data to represent your community board, the parks in your neighborhood, and through various different metrics. That I'm going to put a pin in it there. And then after that, I'm going to move on to the Vital Park score. But does anyone have any questions on the map at this juncture?
I have a question.
It's Susanna.
I'm just interested in knowing how you think this will affect policy. I mean, the Parks Department has all this data, but do you think that having it in this format will have an impact on policy?
I do, and because it relies, as so often does, with public space, on community, on the communities that we serve through the Parks Department having access to this data and knowing what you have and you don't have, so that you can then go advocate to, whether it's city agencies or elected officials, or putting out your own, reports. You have essentially access to a lot more of the data that we now hold internally with the agency. So it's an empowering tool for every community to understand what your assets are. And again, also what your assets are in relation to other community boards in other areas of the city. So if we take dog runs, for example, Community Board 1 has a lot more dog runs than either Community Board 2 or Community Board 3. And you can make these comparisons of, like tree canopy coverage. I
remember when Janine was advocating for Elizabeth Street Garden, there was a stat that she used often about the amount of park area per capita. I think that was the stat in our district compared to others. Is that information in this?
So,
but I see the one about like 97% of us have access within 10 minutes to a park.
Right.
But the other one about per capita.
So the way this is structured, it's all really about that 10-minute mark. That's one of the commissioner's goals, is establishing a 10-minute mark for, all of our community boards. That said, though, Suzanne, I mean, that detailed data is available through existing portals like Open Data NYC. It's not packaged in this format, but it is still available. But really, the core of this.
All within 10 minutes of one park, but there's only one park that we're all within 10 minutes of per capita, which goes way down.
Yeah, Shirley has a question.
Yeah, so we get to know what's in each park. And does that then give us some basis for requesting what we don't have? And how much weight for a community like ours would that give?
Well, it would one of the key functions of this tool is to give you the ability to say, like verbatim, like if we take, restrooms, for example, I mean, so this is not really to your community, our community board, since we have 90% coverage. But for example, Manhattan Community Board 5 could say, okay, we now know for a fact that we have less access to public restrooms than Community Board 2, and can cite this data in that argument. So like one that I know I've been here before talking about in the past, the only two dog runs in the entirety of Community Board 2 are at Washington Square Park. We have, since the pandemic, way too many dogs, a lot more people own dogs these days than pre-pandemic. So if the community board is interested in getting more dog runs into Community Board 2, you can say now here, both visually represented by this, you can see where it drops off in terms of a 10-minute walk. I'm sure that there are people who own dogs, that live on these blocks. You can say, well, we only have 2, whereas if you go down to Community Board 1, they have, what looks like 7 in their community district. And so that's really how the tool is structured, to arm you with the data you need to argue for the resources for your community board. It's all about taking a look at what you have and comparing it to the other community boards. And again, you can also do it by the state disadvantage metric or the gun violence prevention metric. But for the most part, another one like playgrounds. That's another one where Lower Manhattan, we are very fortunate in both 2 and 3 to have 100% coverage. But if you go, again, like Community Board 5, 65%. If you go out to, other districts, the outer Queens, 42%. So, for different categories, it's going to look different, in terms, obviously, for what assets you have, and therefore where you kind of stack up compared to other community boards.
An aspect of this map that is misleading, because Hudson River Park is seen on the map, but none of the amenities in Hudson River Park show up as a city park.
You are totally right. And that is as you just mentioned it, it's because this is a data set that includes the city park system, whereas Hudson River Park is not included in that. That is not an unknown to us. That is something that I understand the Vital Parks team is actively working to correct for. And, like, for example, you can see here that on a few of these metrics, like Central Park, some dots appear, but it doesn't have the same coloration as the other lines do. And that is something very much on the radar of the team that they're working to solve for. Because, at the end of the day, if you dive into the weeds, it's different Excel tabulations with different rows and columns that need to kind of be meshed and matched to make it seamless.
What is engaged and empowered in the legend?
Sure. So why don't I go back to, that's more easily shown in the on the home page. So again, just as a refresher, if you navigate to the Parks Department website, right on the home page, Vital Parks for All. And then right here, I clicked into this to get to the dashboard itself. And then if you go to check your park's vital signs and learn more, that takes you to this page that explains a little bit more about how the process works and gives you a detailed breakdown of each of the elements. Was that Ritu that asked that question?
Yes.
Great. Hi, Ritu. So to answer your question, supported by engaged and empowered New Yorkers, parks are cared for by dedicated, it's the blurb right here, that are welcome to all. In addition, parks that are supported by engaged and empowered New Yorkers offer enriching park programming, making the park active and vibrant. They must also have ample volunteer opportunities and embrace partner groups to help steward and advocate for their park's present and its future. And this lists each of these bullet lists actually corresponds to, for the most part, different metrics that are in that dashboard. So they all sync back up, so to speak. And that's a good segue, if no one has any other questions on the map, to the other facet of Vital Parks, which is this Vital Park score. So we can start with good old Washington Square Park. And if you search it, it will pop right up. And this now also appears if you're just on the Parks Department website and you search for a park just without being in the Vital Park system. This is now baked into every park that populates, right? So we have a park condition score of 84, no recent capital investment. because we are now 10 years on from the renovation of the park. It shows the trees mapped, and just as an aside, if you click this, it is a shortcut directly to our tree map, where you can really zoom in. Let's see if I can get to the park right here. I love this view of the park. You can see all of our wonderful trees shaded by the different species. You can click on all of them. That's my favorite tree in the park, the northern catalpa. But in any event, when getting back to this, it essentially shows, in the empowered and engaged section, it's all broken out by the pillars. So Ritu, going back to your question, in terms of empowered and engaged users, there's 291 recent or future events in the public facing special event calendar for the park. And it does have volunteer engagement opportunities through the Washington Square Park Conservancy. And if you click that, it would take you to the volunteer group directory, where again, you can dial into, your park, and through many different ways get connected to volunteer opportunities. So it's, this initiative, it's empowering data on our end too. It's been really nice to streamline and kind of put all in one place a lot of the different maps and initiatives that we've been working on to a succinct platform. So like, let's do another one, another property in community board 2. How about Fiorello LaGuardia Park? That one's just south of the park. That one's a very clean park, 97 park condition score, very nice. But obviously is a much smaller park. It has less mapped trees. It doesn't really, there's no active event space, and there's no volunteer opportunities or groups there. And that's just an example of a more pocket park property. And it's yet again another way, if you're somebody who lives across from Fiorello LaGuardia Park, you can look this up and see exactly what that means to you. And if you want to then go, you can go into the park's condition score and learn more about it. I will mention quickly, just because Susanna, you asked about some data that's not part of it. You can actually, if you really want to go in the weeds, you can look at how the park condition score is calculated. It takes you over to GitHub, where a lot of the NYC open data is. If your eyes glaze over, please tell me, but it actually breaks it down how the park condition score is calculated. It essentially takes, I think this is really cool. It shows how it takes our internal parks inspection program data and weighs it based on different percentages. So, cleanliness is rated a bit more than structural and landscape. And then even within it, the various metrics are weighted differently. To try and provide a properly weighted park condition score. But that was really in the weeds. Let me go back to the home page.
Are all the conservancies and private organizations that support the parks, the various parks,
yes,
in this database?
Yes.
Like
so
the Washington
if you
Square Association as well as the Washington Square Conservancy?
Well, the association is classified as a neighborhood association, so it's not classified the same way. But that's both prevalent in the map. If you go to where is it? Park partner groups, you can see again broken up by code by district, and then the dots represent each location that has a partner group. So, for us, it's Washington Square Park, Christopher Park. What is that?
There is the Jefferson Market Garden on that map. Sorry.
Let's see. I don't believe so, because again, I think Jefferson Market Garden has a different relationship with us than is typical. But that's actually a good question, Suzanne. I'm going to bring that one back. That's a unique use case.
My other question, because Jefferson Market stands out just because it's quite a large space for a garden. But one of the questions I have is, as you go to these conservancies, I think it would be interesting to compare neighborhoods, but also I wonder if there's a standard beginning to develop for each conservancy organization about kind of website formula. like it would be nice to see a kind of standard language for the conservancies throughout the city to be able to say this, this is where their financial records are, this is where, their contact information, like a sort of, instead of like a home page that just tells you when they're planting tulips.
Sure. That's a great piece of feedback. I will say another, and I am going to bring that back to the Vital Parks team. And I would say another way you can access that as well is, you see how it says here, it says NYC's volunteer group directory. So
Yes.
if you, and again, this is just, another way to get to the same place. And you can look at all of the partner groups that are offering volunteer opportunities in the city. And let's say you want to go to Manhattan only, and excuse me, here is a list of all of the approved park partners in the borough of Manhattan, for example. And so what I'm going to go back to them with is, this is sort of the next step, right? So like if you go to, like the City Hall Park Conservancy, and, you click on their website, essentially what you're saying is like, is there a resource to see or best practices for how the parks conservancies represent themselves in their homepage?
Yes, I think that would be, well, I think that would be a nice system-wide standard, but I also could see the utility of this if, for example, there's always been talk over the years that conservancies in more affluent districts should try to do more for parks in poorly served districts. And this would be an excellent way for one conservancy to go look for others or parks that don't have them, but to go look at others and then see what their budgets are, for example.
Yeah.
No,
that's a great point.
Kind of standard language,
That's a great point.
to say.
What the programs are.
I'm absolutely going to bring that back to the team. But I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing because that is the demo. Unless
Shirley had a question.
I have
Shirley,
another question, but I'm not so sure it's actually about the map or not, or it is about the data in a way. But I'll just tell you, Will, what my impression was when I did see that presentation back in June. And the emphasis was one on the community participation.
yes.
And two, a very strong point was made, which I knew anyhow from the past, was that one of the most important things in parks is programming. So I guess one question is programming integrated someplace for each of these locations,
Yes.
organizations?
Absolutely. So public events.
That physical, the program is, my whole background is
Yes. So that's
programming is in a sense, that's the initial thing, because you can really get the community more involved when there are certain kinds of things going on that they create.
Absolutely. And so it's captured in the public events metric. And as you can see here through the description, it says citywide, 60% of people live within a 10-minute walk to a park that has held a public event or program within the past year. And for community board 2, we're at 95%. And you can see again, if you dial in, where those programs are held. And so there's a dot at Washington Square, there's a dot over here at Merchant's House, and the new plaza next to it, and one here at Vesuvio. And those really go by as well. It all goes back to upcoming events and programs in parks. And so what's listed on our calendar. And so, Susanna, back to your point about how this is still a work in progress and we are ironing out kinks. If someone, and this happens in Washington Square all the time, just because you get a special event permit to hold an event in Washington Square Park doesn't necessarily mean you put it on the public facing events website. You have to request to do that. And so if there are other, like for example, the West 4th Street courts, we all know that there are basketball tournaments that happen at these courts regularly, but the organizers are not requesting for those to be added to the Parks Department website. So they are not showing up here in this metric because they're not cross-pollinating over to that. And so that's something that that's another thing that we're aware of, trying to figure out a solve for, that involves, syncing up our SEMS system to our website system, which is again, in the weeds and something that will take time.
Julie's got one more.
Or maybe even two. Well,
Of course.
yes, what I'm trying to figure out from, again, that presentation, which seemed to have been oriented toward what improvements you put in by way of community participation. So that would be what kind of participation? In other words, kind of an active type thing. And I'm seeing this as sort of the resource that you go to maybe to guide you. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so like to pull up a very apt example for, for that use case, street tree coverage, right? So this is the breakout of street tree coverage for both, for all three of the Lower Manhattan community boards, 1, 2, and 3. And as you can see, we're actually below a lot of other folks in some of our closer community board districts. And so let's say, Shirley, that you really love street trees and want more street trees to come to community board 2, you now can see, even down to the block, because again, the way it kind of heat maps, where it's dark green where there are a lot of street trees and light green where there are not, you can actually go drill down and say, we're really missing a good deal of street trees in the blocks just east of the park. And then you're armed when you go to say, an elected official or to the Parks Department and saying, hey, we see here through this map, visually represented, there are not street trees here. We, the community board, are saying we would appreciate street trees there. That's a very concrete use case.
Yeah, it's okay. That's an actual item. But how about if you want to do a program, like in Washington Square Park now, you have the Latin dancing once a week. Like,
sure.
How does that interact with this? As a matter of fact, how did that come about? I guess it was through the Conservancy.
It was through the Conservancy. That is one of the weekly programs we offer through the season. It's wonderful. It just ended for the season. All of our programming ended at the end of October. But I guess to answer your question, Shirley, to find that, you would be looking at the public events metric here, and then you would click on, so like, you see that there's a dot here, right? You would then click on upcoming events and programs to see the actual event listing. And then you'd be able to see that for any park where it's listed, right? But that's going to be.
If you want to innovate an event or innovate a continuing program,
yes,
how does that work with this?
Sure. The short answer is it doesn't. It is a separate facet of engaging with the park system. So how, it kind of, you can access it from this website, but essentially if you see up here, there's a permits page. You would hit permits and then special event permit, and then you would actually log in and submit a special event request. But that is a wholly separate, that's just one of the things that the Parks Department has been doing forever, issuing special events permits for programs in parks. But to succinctly answer your question, that's not something that's specifically engaged with the actual process of applying for an event application is not engaged with on this dashboard.
So Will, to summarize, can you just recap what you think we or others should consider this, or how to use this, or when to use this? I mean, you talked about, to support requests, hey, we don't have enough trees, and then you could show that on the map.
Right. So like, absolutely. So, it all goes back to that we are, empowering New Yorkers with the data that you need to celebrate and advocate for your own space, right? So it all just goes, that's the key sentence. We're empowering all of you with the data to celebrate and advocate for your parks in the way that you choose, right? So it really goes back to, it would be a tall order, but let's say people come out of the woodwork and say, we would really like to have a hiking trail in Lower Manhattan. You would be able to then go and say, we have absolutely none. Whereas when you go to Upper Manhattan, you have a ton. So we would, the data supports our our desire to have a hiking trail, please work with us on it. And then that is given, that ask can be given to whomever you choose, whether it's if you're working with grantees or grantors, whether you're working with city agencies, elected officials, you're essentially arming yourself with this data. So like it goes back to, we are, again, like in our district, we have enough parks with high condition scores where we're rated at 100. I think on the whole, the reason why part of the sentence says, we are empowering New Yorkers with the data they need to both advocate and celebrate their own parks. I think there's a lot that Community Board 2 can celebrate that's highlighted here. I mean, when we took a look at the block that you all of the room you're sitting in, to have all of the more of these be green than not, speaks well to the assets and resources that this community board has, but there are areas for improvement, right? So like an interesting one is greenway routes. And this is another one that kind of goes back to, Susanna, your point about like Hudson River Park, that entire greenway is not included in this data. But if you go to it, it actually looks like we have only 14% compared to District 3. And in District 3, you have the entirety of the greenway of the East River, which is a city park system, which is why it's included there, as well as Sarah D. Or excuse me, not Sarah D. The greenway, the Allen Street greenway. And so, like, you could say again, like, obviously, once Hudson River Park is able to be added, this will change a bit, but you would still be able to see, I would wager, that this part would still be pretty dim, and you could say like, hey, why isn't there, for example, a greenway from Union Square to Washington Square down University, for example? And you would be able to say, that like this data and this visualization would be able to back you up and say, it does not exist.
It's a strong tool for both our annual district needs statement, our priority budget requests, and also for strategic planning,
Absolutely. That is it. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen unless folks have other questions.
University Place, common greenway.
What's the definition of a greenway? Stupid question.
Quizzing me.
It's like Houston, just like painted as a greenway, but
sure.
If I walk down it, it's just Houston.
Yeah. So the definition, and I just it says a green is essentially they are routes that cyclists can utilize to get from point A to point B. That's not a bike lane. So it's essentially like, for example, the Hudson River Park Greenway, the one that's not included in this system, is that protected two-way lane that actually does go up and down the entirety of that stretch of the West Side Highway. But like in District 3, like you can, there's clearly a bike path up and down those Allen Street malls. Same thing with the East River Park Greenway. So that's really the definition, is that it's an area that's Parks Department property where bicyclists can actively commute from point A to point B.
Well, we have a question in the chat. Can you see it, or do you want us to read it?
Let me pull it up.
It says, is the playground equipment defined? Is it to compare ours to others? And so that citizens can explore available equipment.
Yes, that's got to be that's Steve Grandy. Yes, it
there
is.
You go. Yeah.
So here, let me share my screen again. So if you go back to, let me just go back to Vital Parks. So let me pull up the actual map, go to playgrounds, and it really gives a pretty base definition of a playground. Steve, to answer that question even in an even more detailed fashion, it would be assessed more in the Vital Park score. So if you go to, for example, in the park condition score, it's part of what is assessed as part of that condition score. And that's why I felt it prudent to show the actual underpinnings of it, because it goes into, you can see right there that structural, the play equipment is 25% of that structural metric. So it is captured. But in terms of the detail of it, if you type in Washington Square Park, it does not show you, like, for example, it shows that we have playgrounds. It does not show the specific play equipment featured in each playground, which I think is also part of Steve's question.
Yeah, Matt's got a question.
A follow-up question. So those component, by the way, there's no depth in the weeds too far for my taste.
Love that.
As a
Love that.
database nerd, I am incredibly impressed, right? And I was concerned about cost, and then I was Googling, and it's like all volunteers built this. It's
Yeah.
easily a $10 million database, so I'm deeply impressed. Can a citizen, can I go on and look at the underlying, not the composite score, but the underlying score?
Yes, you can. I don't actually, I'm not going to share my screen. I'm just going to see if it actually pulls it up. So that GitHub link, you can actually download, the data sets that are used to calculate those scores. So like if you know how to use GitHub or NYC Open Data, that portal, you absolutely can. And you would have to download this public code and then plug it into that relevant data set, once you get it set up on your own.
And then a slightly related question, which is for the playground quality, is that, I think it was like 25% of a 30% score.
Yeah,
is that binary? Is it like, yes, they have playground equipment, no, they don't, or is it some?
So that's a great question. Here it is. If, I believe that I will actually, that is one of the more detailed questions I think I've ever been asked. I will take that back to get a firm answer, but I would posit that if you are pulling up a park that does not have a piece of play equipment, it is likely rated as null. So it wouldn't go against the overall park condition score by being rated as 0. It would almost be like an NA, so that it would kind of skip over that and hopefully aggregate out in the final park score, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, thanks, Will. I think that was all the questions. If you have one more second, I hate to, what's the right word? What? Yeah, put you on the spot, but we had a gentleman who attended today, had a question about some new park enforcement. Do you mind covering that? I know it's not on the agenda.
Happily, with the caveat that I don't oversee parks enforcement, so
No, I understand. Can you pose your question? Yeah.
Come up and
See,
this is.
always a chance when you appear, Will, that you're going to get some questions. So thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Will. How are you doing today?
Hi, Eric. I'm well.
Listening. My name is Eric. Eric, we know each other from the park. I've been an artist in Washington Square Park for nearly a decade. Up until a month ago, I have showed my work in the same space 4 days a week without any problem or incident. On September 27th, 8 park officers, PEP officers with 6 police officers came in, evicted every artist all day Friday, and that's been the case every day since then. That every artist has been kicked out of the park regularly for the last nearly 40 days. Officially, it's been called no change in enforcement, but if you look at pictures from the day before the 27th, and you look at every picture in the park afterwards, you can definitely see that there has been a chilling effect on free expression, especially in the Fountain Circle. Very upset about this, as are most of the other artists that have been coming out regularly for years with 0 problem or incident. That's a real issue for us. And as you know, this enforcement has caused myself and 3 other artists to be threatened by drug dealers who I've seen your PEP officers hug and fist bump and not bother.
But let's break it into parts. Will, is there anything about the enforcement you want to convey? Or?
I mean, the parks enforcement officers are enforcing the rules and regulations of Washington Square Park. If again, I'm happy to ask if I can have a representative from Parks Enforcement attend the next meeting, if that's of interest. But that's a directive that comes from their chain of command. and effectuates itself at the park, and they are enforcing the rules and regulations of the park. Again, since I don't oversee them directly, they are not in my chain of command. That is the information I can provide.
Can you just remind how parks, how they report out?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a sergeant stationed at the park who has officers below them, and then they report up through a chain of command that includes captains for the one per section of Manhattan in our case, and then they report up through a central parks enforcement chain.
It's still in the parks. It's still...
Correct. It's ultimately overseen by the Assistant Commissioner for Urban Park Services.
Okay.
Has there been a policy change?
Are you aware of a change?
I am not aware of any policy.
It's change of enforcement. There are rules that prohibit any expression, especially in the Fountain Circle, that have been either tolerated, ignored, accepted for the last decades. For decades, it's been allowed. And starting on the 27th, it's been a hard line, 100%. Every rule is enforced on everybody. And that has driven out buskers, musicians, artists, people just coming in to give out free information to the public. And in addition, it's wildly inconsistently applied over the last 40 days. Right. Some days they do 4 sweeps a day. Yesterday, they did none. So, and there have been 2 arrests of artists on their, just showing their art.
And it sounds like it's both, they're nixing or starting to enforce the nixing of both commerce and artists, right? Like the selling of wares is one thing.
Everybody who comes to the park is not classified as either a citizen expressing themselves or as an artist showing work. Everyone is considered a commercial venture in the park currently.
Just from my own consideration, I'm just mentally set. So you're saying not only is it people selling stuff who are getting picked out, but it's also people who are just dancing.
Just expressing themselves. They're getting moved. People playing the piano. I've seen them have to move their pianos 3 times in a day.
You know, I will say I was at the park today, saw 2 jazz bands, the gentleman on his piano, saw folks with their art up on tables. I think that if you walk to the park on any given day, you will still see folks expressing themselves.
As I said, wildly inconsistently enforced. Yesterday, there was 0 enforcement, no walkarounds. The day before, they arrested a kid, and that was it, and left everybody else.
Will, is there anything that we can do to help get a forum? Is there, as a community board?
I mean, I'm more than happy to request that, you know, for the December meeting, as you know, I was going to present on another topic that I need to come back with. And, you know, I can ask if we have a representative from Parks Enforcement that can join me and speak to the enforcement of rules and regulations at the park. I'd have to go and make that request to that division, but more than happy to do that.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry, that's the best we can do.
No, believe me, I've been trying for 2 years to get a conversation with anybody on the PEP side of things, and nobody has talked to anybody about this. They just keep acting and pushing the people who are just trying to express themselves out of the park.
You communicate with any elected officials?
We had been waiting 8 months for a follow-up meeting in January. We had some regular dialogue going. There was a changeover at the beginning of the year. We had some conversations, and then we have been dropped like a hot brick.
Council member that.
Right.
It's Carlina.
Yeah, and their staff has not responded after the whole year. So we've been shut out.
Are you guys organized in any way?
I mean, we have a few of us who've been regularly communicating, and then we have an ad hoc network that goes out outside
We
of
should
that.
have a point person that we can.
I'm the
communicate
point
with.
person.
We can go through Mark to see if we can get some time with the council.
Okay.
I mean,
But
Will
you know how to-
knows me from around the park. We've talked a couple times before. All the PEP officers know me. Like I said, it's been a decade I've been at that park.
And what's your email? Like, how
Yeah,
do
you
you?
didn't share
It's
that.
right on the-
Okay, yeah, great. Of course, I have it up there. Let me ask Mark to see if we can get some time with the council. That'd be great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, I saw one more thing. I don't want to be accused of missing it. Yeah, thanks. There was, has there been any, there was a question about I'm sorry, my eyes are getting old. Off-leash dogs.
Yeah.
Off-leash dogs, is that covered in the, I know that we, in the map, it showed, dog areas, dog park areas. I
I
don't,
don't believe that it shows off-leash areas here. Let me check and see if it does.
an off-leash would be within a park area, or would it be separate from a dog?
It would be separate from a dog run. I mean, off-leash areas only exist in parks that don't have dog runs.
Okay,
And
there you go.
even if they do, it has to be specified on the park signage that there are off-leash dog hours.
Okay, that, see, that's a good question. I didn't
That's
even
a
know that.
question. I didn't know. We've had questions about dog leashing before.
I didn't know that there were
Um,
areas.
No, that's what I,
So no, this I'm just looking at the map right here. It only tallies up places that have distinct dog runs.
yeah. Right, another, yeah, okay, just, we'll put it in the notes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Will, and.
Thank you, Will.
No problem. And I
You don't
do
have-
see in the chat, I'm gonna guess that GS is Georgia. Hi, Georgia. No, that's correct. Washington Square Park does not have off-leash dog hours. And we are aware that there are a group of people who do continue to visit the park and use let their dogs off leash. And
Yeah.
that is another condition Parks Enforcement is aware of, and there has been no policy change, and they are going out and writing summonses for it.
Are there parks in the CB2 area that do have off-leash dogs?
No.
There are, I think it's a great case point actually of the tool itself. I mean, I can pull it right back up. When you look up our dog runs in our community, Washington Square, and again, I should caveat Hudson River Park not represented. I'm well aware
Right,
they have
right.
dog runs too, but we're the only two dog runs in the entirety of Greenwich Village of Community Board
Sure.
2.
No.
So,
Dogs in CB2, that makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
we,
that's a perfect example of a way to use this Vital Parks Explorer.
we had a thing that came in last week, just complaints about people using JJ Walker. I know it's not your responsibility, Will, but it's more for Ms. Flores. That people are using JJ Walker as an off-leash dog run.
Look, Teresa's on the call, and I don't know if she wants to speak to that.
We do have a lot of need for enforcement there, and we have asked them to come and do some patrols, and they do catch people a lot. It just is a problem, that we need to have a field open, and every time we have it open, it can get used as a dog run because people are looking for places to run around with their dogs. So
Right.
we need more.
And I have distinctly personally told people, you please use that. We have 2 really well-maintained dog runs in this park. Please use them. And they essentially, just do not want to do it for whatever reason, and would rather risk it.
It's interesting that you referred to JJ Walker as an open park. That it was in the conversation I had with some other community board members. I remember when JJ Walker used to be locked, and the key was controlled by the front desk at Dapolito.
Right.
Except for a
That's
few
right.
special people who seem to have keys somehow.
VIP.
Yes, but but now obviously without Dapolito there, Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems JJ Walker's open more frequently now.
Yeah, we open it when we have somebody go by there. We do have someone who has the code to it when they have a permit. So
right.
it can stay open sometimes after that permit is done, which we are trying to stop. But it depends on the hours. We don't need to have it open except for like after school.
Yes.
So it's based on permits and it's based on after school. So that's how we deal with it.
Well, thanks for clarifying. And again, Will, thanks for coming. Will, I asked Will before the meeting if he needed a resolution of any kind. He said that no, but I will put the conversation in the notes, in the copious notes. I always prepare, Shirley.
Thank you, Rich. I have seen your copious notes.
Thank you.
Can
I do
attest.
not use ChatGPT or any other automation, although I should really start.
And I would be remiss if I didn't thank you all for co-sponsoring the November 25th Manhattan Town Hall that the commissioner is going to do related to Vital Parks. Thank you for doing that. As soon as the flyer is ready, it was supposed to be today, hopefully tomorrow. I'll send it to Mark, so you
That-
all have
Yes,
it.
that's Monday, right? That's Monday, the 25th?
I believe so.
The
That's-
Monday of
The
Thanksgiving.
Monday of Thanksgiving, that's
The
right.
Monday of Thanksgiving week. Yeah, that's yes, it is a Monday.
Okay, well, thank you all for attending, and Ritu, I'll add you on the list. I think that was the only other attendee. Ritu is a board member. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Again, Will.